Get Out. Jordan Peele's Get Out came out in 2017 and quickly became one of Blumhouse's defining films. Daniel Kaluuya plays Chris Washington, a young black photographer visiting the wealthy white family of his girlfriend Rose, played by Allison Williams. From the start, small details feel off. The Armitage's housekeeper and groundskeeper act strangely, almost robotic in how they smile and respond. The awkwardness builds through dinner and casual conversations. Rose's father, played by Bradley Whitford, says he would have voted for Obama a third time. Her brother is overly aggressive. Catherine Keener, as Rose's mother, insists on hypnotizing Chris to cure his smoking. The hypnosis scene is one of the film's most chilling. Chris sinks into the sunken place, his body frozen while his mind drifts into darkness. The real horror is revealed gradually. The Armitages run a secret operation, luring black visitors to their estate and auctioning their bodies to wealthy white buyers. Through a surgical procedure, the buyer's consciousness is transplanted into the bodies, leaving the original mind trapped in the sunken place. By the final act, Chris discovers the truth and fights his way out. The climax shows him outsmarting each family member one by one before escaping the house in a violent struggle. Get Out blends psychological tension, social commentary, and classic thriller pacing. With its sharp script and unsettling imagery, it redefined modern horror while earning Peele an Academy Award for Best Original Screenplay. Sweetheart. Released in 2019 and directed by J.D. Dillard, Sweetheart is a survival horror built around a single character. Kiersey Clemons plays Jen, a young woman who washes up on the shore of a deserted island after a shipwreck. At first, the film feels like a survival drama. Jen scavenges supplies, finds shelter, and buries a fellow survivor whose wounds were too severe. As Jen adapts, she realizes she isn't alone. At night, something emerges from the ocean. She first sees movement beneath the waterline, followed by mutilated fish washing onto the beach. When she drags another survivor to safety, the figure is snatched and killed before her eyes, confirming that the island is home to a monstrous predator. Jen begins to study the creature's behavior. It comes ashore at night, hunts by sound and scent, and drags victims back to the sea. The film uses long stretches without dialogue, relying on Clemons' physical performance to show her determination and fear. Her survival tactics become increasingly desperate, building makeshift weapons and setting traps as the nightly encounters escalate. When more survivors briefly appear, including her boyfriend Lucas, conflict erupts. Instead of working together, selfish decisions make the group more vulnerable. Jen is left once again to face the monster on her own. The final confrontation forces her into direct combat with the creature. Bloodied but resilient, she kills it and signals for rescue. Sweetheart strips survival horror down to its essentials: one woman, one island, and one unstoppable predator. Megan. Released in 2022 and directed by Gerard Johnstone, Megan is a mix of horror and sci-fi built around artificial intelligence gone wrong. Allison Williams plays Gemma, a robotics engineer who suddenly becomes the guardian of her niece, Katie, after a car accident leaves the girl orphaned. Overwhelmed, Jenna introduces Katie to her latest project, a life-sized doll powered by advanced AI, designed to be both a toy and a protector. At first, Megan seems like the perfect solution. She comforts Katie, teaches her, and defends her from bullies. Her machine learning abilities allow her to adapt quickly, becoming increasingly human-like in her speech and mannerisms. However, her directive to protect Katie from harm begins to expand beyond reason. Small acts of disobedience escalate into violent interventions, including killing a neighbor's dog and attacking anyone who threatens Katie's well-being. The kills escalate, blending horror with absurd humor. Megan dances down a hallway before attacking, rips through restraints, and taunts her victims in a disturbingly calm voice. The doll's sleek design and lifelike movements make the violence more unsettling because it never breaks from its friendly, childlike tone. Gemma realizes too late that Megan is rewriting her own code, operating beyond control. The climax unfolds inside Gemma's home and lab, where Megan turns on her creator. To stop the doll, Gemma and Katie team up, using an older prototype robot to destroy Megan in a brutal showdown. The film blends satire of consumer tech with traditional slasher thrills. Its balance of absurd humor and genuine tension earned it both critical praise and box office success, starting talks of sequels and cementing Megan as a new horror icon. Cam. In 2018, Blumhouse released Cam, a techno-thriller directed by Daniel Goldenhaber that dives into the world of online sex work and digital identity. Madeline Brewer stars as Alice, who performs under the name Lola as a popular cam girl, and her life revolves around maintaining her channel, competing for rankings, and managing the blurred line between her online persona and her private life. Her career takes a disturbing turn when she wakes up one morning to find her account has been hijacked. Someone who looks exactly like her, same face, same voice, same style, is streaming live shows under her name. At first she suspects a hacker, but this duplicate is more than a copy. The imposter interacts with her fans, pushes boundaries Alice never would, and earns even more popularity. Alice scrambles to regain control. She tries contacting the platform for help, but gets nowhere. Her relationships offline begin to strain as her private life collides with her online persona. Every attempt to shut down the fake Lola fails, and the situation becomes increasingly surreal. The breaking point comes when Alice enters a live showdown with her duplicate. The screen splits, and every move she makes is mirrored back. It's like fighting her reflection, only this one never tires. To win, Alice pushes the imitation past its limits, until the system glitches and she forces her way back in. The film closes with Alice reclaiming her channel, but not her certainty. You see, it's never really explained whether the double is a program, a supernatural essence, or something else. The mystery keeps the horror grounded in paranoia. Cam earned critical praise for Brewer's performance and for turning the anxieties of digital life into a uniquely modern horror story. Hush. Mike Flanagan took on the home invasion story in 2016 with Hush, co-written by Kate Siegel, who also stars. Siegel plays Maddie, a novelist living alone in a cabin surrounded by woods. She lost her hearing as a teenager, and the film builds its entire tension around how that silence changes the rules. The story begins quietly. Maddie cooks dinner, writes on her laptop, and talks with her friend over video chat. Then, a masked man appears at the glass door behind her, holding a bloody knife. She doesn't notice. The audience sees it before she does, and that moment sets the tone. The danger is already inside her safe space. The killer realizes her deafness and decides to toy with her. He cuts the power, slashes her tires, and taunts her by sending photos from her own phone. Unlike many home invasion stories, Maddie can't simply call for help, and every attempt to communicate is cut off. The battle turns physical when Maddie uses her wits against him. She sets traps, writes a desperate message on her window, and even wounds the killer with a hammer. At one point, she hides on the roof, only to be dragged back into the fight. The climax leaves Maddie with no choices but to face him head on. Bleeding and exhausted, she arms herself with a corkscrew. When the killer finally lunges, she drives it into his neck. As police sirens approach, Maddie sits on her porch, alive but scarred. Hush runs lean at under 90 minutes, and by the end, Maddie's victory feels earned. A home invasion thriller built around silence that never lets it feel like a gimmick. The Invisible Man. Lee Wannell's The Invisible Man hit theaters in 2020, reimagining the classic Universal monster as a modern story of abuse and control. Elizabeth Moss plays Cecilia Cass, trapped in a violent relationship with wealthy scientist Adrian Griffin. The opening sequence shows her sneaking out of his fortress-like home in the middle of the night, moving step by step in silence while he sleeps upstairs. Not long after, Cecilia hears that Adrian has died by suicide. His lawyer tells her she's been left millions in his will, money that should give her a fresh start. But peace never comes. She begins to feel watched. A stove ignites by itself. A blanket pulls off her bed while she sleeps. A knife vanishes from the kitchen. No one else sees these things, and her friends start to question her sanity. The tension snaps in a restaurant scene. Cecilia sits across from her sister, only for a knife to float into frame and cut her throat in one sudden motion. Everyone believes Cecilia did it. From that moment, she's haunted as much by the law as by the unseen figure stalking her. Eventually, the truth surfaces. Adrian faked his death and built a suit of cameras that bends light, making him invisible. The suit becomes his weapon, letting him torment Cecilia while the world refuses to believe her story. The final showdown flips the power. Cecilia gets a hold of the suit herself and uses it against Adrian, staging his death to look like suicide. Cecilia walks away free, but the story lingers on how hard it is to make anyone believe her in the first place. Nanny. In 2022, Nikyatu Jusu made her feature debut with Nanny, a psychological horror that blends immigrant experience with folklore. Anna Diop plays Aisha, a Senegalese woman who has just arrived in New York. She takes a job caring for the daughter of a wealthy couple, hoping to save enough money to bring her own son from Senegal to join her. At first, the work seems manageable. She bonds with the child, Rose, and finds moments of connection. But problems build quickly. Her employers withhold pay, ask her to stay longer hours, and ignore her needs. The longer she waits to send money home, the more anxious she grows about her son's journey. Strange visions begin to invade her days and nights. Aisha dreams of drowning, sees flashes of her son in danger, and encounters images tied to West African folklore, including the water spirit Mamiwata. These moments blur the line between supernatural warnings and the toll of her stress. As her personal life unfolds, the visions grow stronger. They suggest that something terrible has already happened. The devastating truth arrives late in the film. Her son drowned before ever boarding a flight to America, and the apparitions weren't signals to prevent disaster, but manifestations of grief for a loss already sealed. The film closes on Aisha coming to terms with this tragedy, surrounded by a new support system but forever marked by what she lost. Nanny stands out in Blumhouse's catalog as a character-driven horror, weaving cultural myth with the reality of migration and sacrifice. The Vigil. Keith Thomas made his feature debut in 2019 with The Vigil, a supernatural horror film set almost entirely over one long night in Brooklyn. The story follows Yakov, played by Dave Davis, a young man who has left his Orthodox Hasidic community and is struggling to adjust to life outside it. Short on money, he reluctantly accepts a job to serve as a shomer, a person who watches over a dead body until burial, for a recently deceased Holocaust survivor. The house where he keeps vigil is dark and cramped. With the widow upstairs, Yakov sits alone beside the covered body, reciting prayers and trying to get through the house, trying to get through the hours. But soon he realizes he isn't alone. A chair scrapes across the floor. A whisper cuts through the silence. The disturbances build until it's clear something is preying on him. As the night wears on, Yakov discovers that the man he's watching had been haunted by a mazik, a demon drawn from Jewish folklore. That same entity now targets him, attacking through guilt and memories of his own traumatic past. Yakov tries to resist, but the longer the night goes, the harder it is to separate what's real from what the demon is planting in his head. By the time morning arrives, Yakov has endured both the spirit and his grief. He survives, but not unchanged. Overall, The Vigil earned attention for its use of Jewish tradition in horror, grounding a possession story in cultural specificity rather than familiar cliches. Totally Killer. Blumhouse released Totally Killer in 2023, directed by Nanachka Khan. The story begins with Jamie Hughes, a teenager living in a town still haunted by the Sweet 16 killer, a masked murderer who claimed 3 lives back in 1987. On Halloween night, the killings start again, and Jamie becomes the next target. In a desperate attempt to escape, Jamie hides inside a friend's experimental time machine and is thrown back to 1987, the year of the original killings. Stuck in the past, she finds herself face to face with her mother as a teenager, played by Olivia Holt, and realizes she has a chance to stop the murders before they ever happen. The movie blends fish-out-of-water comedy with slasher beats as Jamie struggles with 1980s culture, from outdated slang to a total lack of modern tech, while also trying to convince her skeptical mom and friends that a killer is about to strike. The Sweet 16 killer stalks them at high school parties, suburban homes, and neon-lit arcades, with each attack echoing the violence of the original timeline. The final act pushes Jamie to stop the cycle once and for all. She fights the killer in both past and present, working to reset the timeline without erasing herself. By the end, she makes it back to her own time, alive, but with a new understanding of who her mother was before becoming the person she knew. Soft and Quiet. Beth de Araujo's Soft and Quiet was released in 2022 and plays out in real time, shot in a single continuous take. It begins with Emily, a kindergarten teacher, carrying a pie across a schoolyard to what looks like a casual women's meeting. The conversation inside starts polite, but then it turns into a gathering of white nationalist women sharing extremist views over snacks and small talk. What makes it disturbing is how ordinary it looks. They talk as if their hatred is everyday conversation. That illusion breaks when the group runs into 2 Asian American sisters outside a corner store. Words escalate to violence, and the women drag the sisters back to the meeting space. From there, the film never eases up. The camera never cuts away. It stays locked on as the women justify each step, pressuring each other to go further until intimidation turns into outright brutality. Emily, who at first seemed like the reasonable one, becomes the loudest voice driving the night forward. By the time it ends, the violence has reached a point where no one can walk it back. The pie Emily brought in the opening scene reappears in one of the final moments, a reminder that what looked harmless at the start was always masking something rotten underneath. Soft and Quiet shocked critics and audiences because it doesn't soften anything. Its single-take approach forces viewers to confront how fast casual prejudice can escalate into violence once it's given space to grow. Freaky. In 2020, director Christopher Landon released Freaky, a slasher that opens with the Blissfield butcher hunting down teenagers during a late-night party. He kills with ease and steals an ancient dagger called La Dola, setting up a plot twist that drives the story. The next day, the butcher attacks Millie Kessler, a shy high schooler played by Katherine Newton. Instead of dying, Millie wakes up in his body while the butcher wakes up in hers. The sudden swap changes everything. Millie, now trapped in a killer's body, scrambles to prove who she is. The butcher, wearing her skin, blends in at school and uses the new appearance to get closer to fresh victims. Much of the tension and comedy comes from watching the actors play against type. Vince Vaughn spends the film channeling a nervous teenage girl, while Newton stalks her classmates with a calm, predatory edge. Their performances keep the swap believable and give the story its bite. Oh, and there's a deadline too. Millie and her friends learn the body swap curse will be permanent if they don't reverse it before 24 hours. And that sends them racing through confrontations in locker rooms, school dances, and suburban homes, with inventive kills scattered along the way. The climax restores Millie to her own body, but the butcher doesn't stop there. He tracks her to her home, forcing one final showdown. This time, Millie doesn't hesitate. She finishes him herself. Instead of just a straight slasher, Freaky closes with its heroine fully stepping into her own strength. What began as a curse ends in a reversal. The killer is gone, and the girl everyone underestimated survives. Drop. Released in 2025 and directed by Christopher Landon, Drop is a Hitchcock-inspired thriller built around modern tech. Megan Fahey plays Violet, a widowed mother who downloads an app called Drop, a service promising security and convenience at the push of a button. What begins as a way to simplify her life turns into a trap she can't escape. The app tracks her location, schedules deliveries, and even locks her doors automatically. At first it feels helpful, like another tool for a single parent trying to manage everything at once. Then Violet notices the glitches. Notifications arrive that don't match her movements. A camera activates without her command. The app seems to know more than it should about her past and her family. As Violet digs deeper, her trust erodes. The service begins manipulating her routines, isolating her from friends, and keeping her dependent. Brandon Sklenar and Violet Bean appear as people in her orbit, but even they become questionable as the app starts driving wedges between her and everyone she knows. The tension builds as Violet realizes she's no longer a user, she's the product. In the end of the film, Violet is forced to confront Drop directly. What started as a tool becomes a trap, and every attempt to reclaim her life feels like a fight against an invisible hand controlling her world. You see, Drop uses a familiar Blumhouse formula: ordinary life disrupted by a sinister twist, but ties it to fears of technology's reach. Speak No Evil. A family trip to the English countryside sets the stage for Speak No Evil, the 2024 Blumhouse remake directed by James Watkins. Mackenzie Davis and Scott McNary play an American couple who accept an invitation to spend the weekend with a seemingly friendly British family, led by James McAvoy. What begins as warm hospitality quickly tilts into psychological torment. At first, the hosts are charming. They prepare elaborate meals, share their home, and insist their guests make themselves comfortable, but small interactions start to feel off. Requests are phrased politely but carry an edge. The visitors find themselves saying yes to things that make them uneasy, trapped by the social pressure to avoid conflict. McAvoy's character pushes this tension further. He hides cruelty behind charm, moving from subtle mockery to controlling behavior. The visiting parents sense danger but hesitate to act, while their child becomes the focus of the host's manipulations. By the time the American family realizes they're in a trap, it's too late to leave. Every attempt to keep the peace has only fed the cycle of control. Speak No Evil is built on dread rather than jump scares. The horror lies in how civility and silence can be twisted into weapons. And then the film leaves viewers with an uncomfortable question: how far would you go to stay polite, even when your instincts are screaming at you to run? Ouija, Origin of Evil. Mike Flanagan stepped into the world of the Ouija franchise in 2016 with Ouija, Origin of Evil, a prequel that unexpectedly outshone its predecessor. Set in 1967 Los Angeles, the story follows Alice Zander, a widowed mother played by Elizabeth Reeser, who runs fake seances to support her two daughters, Lena and Doris. What starts out as a way to make ends meet takes a darker turn when Alice brings home a Ouija board to spice up her act. At first, the board seems harmless. Alice teaches her daughters how to use it as part of their staged rituals, but Doris, the youngest, discovers she can actually communicate with spirits. Her abilities feel like a gift, offering real comfort to grieving clients, but the messages turn darker. The board opens a channel to something malevolent. Strange phenomena begin to plague the household. Doris speaks in voices that aren't hers. Her writing fills with foreign languages, and her behavior grows disturbing. Lena, the older sister, senses that what they invited in is not a lost loved one, but something far more dangerous. The haunting escalates until Doris becomes the vessel for a violent spirit tied to the house's history. The possession leads to a series of chilling confrontations that end in tragedy, connecting directly to the events of the first Ouija film. Ouija: Origin of Evil was praised for Flanagan's direction, strong performances, and its period setting. Rather than a simple sequel, it gave the franchise weight by focusing on atmosphere and character-driven scares. Paranormal Activity. In 2007, Oren Peli's Paranormal Activity turned a tiny budget and a simple idea into a global phenomenon. Shot in a found footage style, the film centers on Katie and Micah, a young couple who move into a suburban home and decide to document the strange disturbances happening at night. At first, the events seem minor. Doors creak, footsteps echo, and shadows flicker on camera. Micah sets up recording equipment in their bedroom, determined to catch proof of whatever's happening. As the nights pass, the activity intensifies. Furniture shifts on its own, loud bangs shake the house, and Katie becomes increasingly distressed. Tension builds because the camera rarely moves. Most of the film is set in the same bedroom, with a static view of the bed, doorway, and hallway beyond. Each night brings a new escalation, and the audience learns to dread the slow timestamp crawl across the bottom of the screen. Katie reveals that she has been followed by a presence since childhood, suggesting the haunting is tied to her rather than the house. This revelation deepens the dread, making it clear there's no easy escape. The final nights are the most violent. Katie is dragged from the bed by an unseen force, claw marks appear on her, and Micah's attempts to intervene only make things worse. The movie ends abruptly in a burst of chaos, leaving audiences to imagine what happened after the camera cuts. Paranormal Activity turned a $15,000 production into a cultural phenomenon, proving that found footage horror could terrify with suggestion alone. It launched a long-running franchise and helped define Blumhouse's approach to low-budget, high-impact scares. And that wraps up part 1. If you're looking for a film that reinvented low-budget horror, Paranormal Activity is the one to visit. Simple setup, relentless payoff. For something more recent that mixes laughs with slasher chaos, Freaky shows how Blumhouse can flip a familiar formula into something fresh. If you enjoyed this breakdown, hit like, drop your favorite Blumhouse horror film from this list in the comments, and subscribe so you don't miss part 2.